هل بات الإسلام يضم أكثر المتطرفين عدوانية بحسب استطلاعات الرأي الأمريكية، أم تضافرت جهود الساسة والكتاب والإعلاميين لشيطنة الإسلام والعالم العربي بعد أحداث 11 من أيلول سبتمبر 2001؟ وكيف تنظر المرأة المسلمة في المعترك السياسي الغربي إلى هذه الأمور، وما هو دورها في تذليل العقبات ومكافحتها؟ من داخل حزب ريسبكت البريطاني، معكم زينب صفار، تابعونا. هي قائدة حزب ريسبكت الاحترام البريطاني في المملكة المتحدة، هي سلمى يعقوب، العضو المنتخب لمجلس مدينة برمنغهام لمدة 5 سنوات، ورئيسة تحالف أوقفوا الحرب في برمنغهام، والناطقة باسم مسجد برمنغهام المركزي. سلمى المعتدلة دينياً والحاصلة على عدد من الجوائز العالمية، تعد اليوم بحسب صحيفة الجارديان من أكثر الشخصيات المسلمة تميزاً في بريطانيا، على الرغم من انتقادها للمشاركة البريطانية في غزو أفغانستان والعراق، واتهام بعض المحافظين لها بعدم الحياء لدفاعها الجريء وبشكل معلن عن آرائها حتى من خلال منصات المساجد. عام 2006 صنفتها مجلة هاربرز بازار واحدة من بين أعلى 30 امرأة ممن يمثلن بريطانيا. درست سلمى وتمرست في المعالجة النفسية، هي سياسية صاعدة وناشطة جدا في حركة السلام. سطع نجمها بعد أحداث 11 من أيلول سبتمبر 2001، حيث هاجمت بشدة التطرف بكل أشكاله، وسافرت إلى الولايات المتحدة والتقت ضحايا أحداث 11 من أيلول سبتمبر، وسعت منذ ذلك الحين إلى بناء الجسور بين الجاليات والجماعات المختلفة في بلدها بريطانيا وفي الخارج. سلمى شاركت متحدثة في عشرات المظاهرات والاحتفالات، ولا سيما تظاهرة شباط فبراير 2003 التي ضمت 2,000,000 مشارك. في نيسان أبريل 2005 تلقت تهديدا بالقتل من مجموعة متطرفة بسبب نشاطها مع دور عبادة مسيحية ويهودية. فماذا تخبرنا سلمى يعقوب عن نشاط المرأة المسلمة في المعترك السياسي الغربي، وعن الحرب الإعلامية ودورها في شيطنة الإسلام حول العالم؟ So Salma Yaqub, welcome to The Inside. And as far as we know that you are the incumbent leader of the Respect Party, which is a British party, and it's a left-wing party, and you are a British Muslim head-veiled woman. How did you manage to get to this position and get through in the UK society and politics?
Well, my background was not political to start with. I'm a psychotherapist and a mom. But after 9/11, when I saw how the war on terror was impacting both in Afghanistan, where innocent people were being killed, and as a British citizen, my country was going to war, and I felt a responsibility that my taxes were being used to bomb other people. It was a personal matter then as a citizen to stand up against what I felt was a great injustice. And I became active in the anti-war movement, and I was chair of the Stop the War coalition in my hometown in Birmingham, and I was speaking up and down the country and helping to mobilise thousands of people at first, and in 2003 it became 2 million people, the largest demonstration ever in British history. And yet, despite that huge mobilisation, which was fantastic in so many ways, it brought together Muslims, non-Muslims, a real show of humanity and solidarity. Yet our government still, when it came to debating in the House of Parliament, did not listen to the people, and indeed the opposition parties did not voice our concerns. And I saw there was a democratic gap even within England, which is famous around the world for being so-called the home of democracy. So I decided to, with some other people like George Galloway, to form a new party called the Respect Party. So that was how I became involved in electoral politics
and
as
what
well.
does this leading role as the leader of the party entail?
Well, it means helping to decide the strategic direction, being the symbolic as well as the practical leader.
How much are you representative in the British society?
Well, I believe that our voice is something which many people can relate to. Whilst I'm overtly a Muslim and in some ways a minority in British society, yet the values that we stand for, which are equality, justice and peace, are values that the vast majority of the population share.
But are Muslims now a minority in the UK? Because we know that it's the second religion after Christianity.
Oh, it's still a minority. We still only form between 2 and 3% of the population as a whole. And in many cities, though, we have a greater percentage, because depending on how immigration worked and people settled. So in some areas, we will form the majority population. But for me, it's not just saying that it's about a Muslim bloc. It's something a bit more deep, because Muslims vote in many different directions. It's not as if all Muslims vote for Respect. There are many vested interests.
It's a left-wing party after all.
Exactly. I mean, our mantra is, if you want peace, you have to have justice. And to have justice, you have to have equality. And this covers many areas. I mean, people may be surprised that despite being one of the richest countries in the world, our pensioners, many are starving. They choose between heating their homes and actually eating. Our students now have to pay huge amounts of tuition fees. This was not heard of in England before. My generation, for example, we had free university education and grants, and now we have a university fee of £9,000 a year, and only the very rich can afford that. And so it is not only about the foreign policy, which obviously I feel very strongly about.
Not about the politics, but about also whatever is pertaining to the life of Brits.
Exactly. Well, everything is political in that sense, because the decisions that we make as a country, the priorities, are of course filtered through politics. And I say that just in the same way that they lied about the war, they justified it to the British people by saying there are weapons of mass destruction. England could be attacked within 45 minutes. They told these lies to mobilize support for the war, and people like myself in the anti-war movement argued, no, this is about imperialism, this is about oil, this is about controlling and remapping the Middle East for American and Western strategic interests. This is not a war that the British people should be part of or supporting. And in the same way, I believe there is a war being waged at home in our country, and it is a class war that the same ruling elites benefit, yet they try to deceive the masses. They never say that we are doing something for a bad reason. They try to put it in the language of something about humanity, yet it is really the very opposite of humanity.
Now, the party's name, Respect, is an acronym that stands for Respect, Equality, Socialism, Peace, Environmentalism, Community and Trade Unionism. Yet you were accused by one of the defectors of your party who just returned to the Labour. You're accused of dividing the local community for political gain. So it's as if, you know, like many other parties and organizations, they use charming and attractive notions and titles to attract and allure the people into their line of thought. Is this what's happening with Respect in this sense?
Well, whenever you put your head up, people will criticize, so it's not unexpected. So for example, when I became politically active, there was some within the Muslim community who said it's haram to engage in politics, especially as a woman, and there were some people who were secular, but in, I would say, a fundamentalist way, who said that people who don't share our faith shouldn't work with people like myself. But for me, it's a middle ground in that I don't have to compromise my values as a Muslim, which I believe in fitra, in something which is a shared humanity which benefits all. It is not a tribalistic approach. So I don't get put off by these criticisms. And in fact, the solidarity element, you know, is the very opposite of divisive politics. Our rulers like to divide and rule. It is a tactic that they use. And so, of course, people would throw some labels at you, especially when they see that you're being successful. But these are easily disproved.
Now, in 2006, Harper's Bazaar magazine named you in the top 30 list of British women alongside Kate Winslet, all of whom they consider to be women shaping Britain. And also, according to the Guardian newspaper, you are the most prominent Muslim woman in the British public life. So how does this add to your responsibilities as a woman and as a politician and as a mother and as a psychotherapist?
Yes, well,
all together.
Well, it's a privilege, but it is also, as you said, a responsibility, because there is a huge scrutiny. And so whilst I am an individual, I am seen to represent not only my constituents who vote for me, and that is an honour, but a responsibility.
Because you were for years the Birmingham City Councillor.
Yes, so I stood for election, and I represent in one of the largest, in fact it is the largest authority in Europe, so that has its own responsibilities, but has a symbolic thing, because so much has been said about Islam, Muslims in this so-called war on terror, which I believe is a war of terror, and the way they demonise Muslims. So to be considered as part of mainstream British society and helping to shape it, of course it is an important thing.
And one of the responsibilities of this role that you're playing is that you also received some death threats from Islamic extremists, and this is because of your affiliation and your work with what they call the left in your party. So how did you respond in this sense? And was it the prime reason for you to step down from the Birmingham City Councillor position?
Oh, not at all. I mean, that happened very early on. I've been active now for over 10 years, so it was in the first couple of years that there were some of our brothers, shall I say, who put a fatwa out and said whoever beheads Salma Yaqub will go straight to Jannah, and astaghfirullah, they said my children are haram to me and they will bury me with the dogs, and they put these threats out. But that never put me off. I mean, I believe that your time is whenever Allah decides, so I never get put off by anybody's threats. In fact, it shows how weak their own thinking is, that they became so insecure that they have to threaten other people in this way. And in fact, their methodology, their approach is one of actually separating themselves off from society, and not actually offering anything constructive or hopeful. And yet some of those very people, when they got in trouble, they asked me
for help.
For help.
Mm-hmm. So how ironic.
Oh, of course. So
yes.
I don't get put off by such threats, no.
Right, Salma, we're going now to stop for a short break, and then we'll be back to focus more on the info war at the heart of the counterinsurgency that is pursued by Western powers in the region. A short break and we'll be back. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Inside. Welcome back, Salma. Well, as we all know that the US has embarked on a new style in its war, which is the info war, and this is being at the central part of its coin, which is the counterinsurgency strategy. And this was manifested actually recently in Syria, and we have seen how the info war taken to a new generation of sophistication after its testing back in 2009 in Iran post to the presidential elections. How dangerous is such kind of strategy, and how should one respond to it?
Well, on one level it seems there's a new sophisticated strategy, but I think we can distill it right down to the same old strategy they've always used. Imperialists never invade other people's countries and say, we are here to invade you and take over because we want to take something from you. They always dress it up. So going right back in 2001 in Afghanistan, they claimed they were going in to liberate these oppressed Muslim women. So there has always been an info war. Even in the previous centuries, when they invaded Africa, they said we are here to civilize these backward barbarian natives. So in one sense,
to free the people and yes,
to bring them sophistication and civilization to be more like the white man, as and they called it the white man's burden, whilst they were oppressing and enslaving millions of people. So it's not new. What is new, though, is that the people who are being oppressed and those who support them also have access now through the internet.
Through the social media, through the internet and the blogs, let's say.
And so they no longer have a monopoly on the narrative and information, which makes them feel even more threatened. Which is why now, when you come back to the sophisticated level, they're almost trying to adopt this insurgent tone, as if they are fighting oppression, they are fighting injustice. Because this is a very powerful narrative of those people who fight back against neoliberalism, against imperialism, and they've seen this has been effective, for example, through the anti-war movement, that it was the largest ever movement which connected internationally on February the 15th, 2003. It was the first time that on one day people from around the world demonstrated. And this really shook the powers. They saw that something different was happening, and then we've seen with the Arab revolutions in Tunisia and Egypt, again the role that social media played, and so how the little people had a voice which before was denied them. And so this is just trying to hijack that medium.
Yes, Selma, but also at the heart of this info war and this strategy is also these proxy human organizations that are being also used in order to manipulate, let's say, and various aspects of the flow of the information. Yes. How can one respond? How do you protect yourself and your society from such kind of a flow of information?
Well, as I mentioned, it's always a struggle between the different narratives. And all we have to do is keep on going and exposing the truth, to say that this is what they are doing. You can trace back who is funding these human rights organizations. You will see where the money chain is. You will see who is supporting who. And by just merely exposing that, you have already broken through in a very powerful way. And at the same time, to explain what is happening. You cannot get away from a political explanation. In some ways, I say to Muslims, don't take it too personally. You know, we have this oppression that we are seeing in many, many places, but they have done the same in Latin America. They have demonized the people there, and they can't say it is against the religion. People like Hugo Chavez, for example, is Christian, but he's anti-imperialist, so he is portrayed as this big devil, as the enemy.
Satan.
So anybody who fights back will be seen as the enemy. But it is sophisticated, these powers, so they will use the narrative which they feel will demonize in the right way to justify their military presence and justify their intervention. So in Syria, they will simplify it all down to, we are against this dictator, and they will not talk about the more complex situation. I mean, my personal opinion is that I condemn the atrocities that are being done in the name of the state. We cannot deny that people are being killed, but at the same time we cannot deny that many of the opposition groups themselves are split, and some of them are being funded, and some of the arms that are coming through,
yes,
it's not simply an insurrection.
And
from
also,
inside.
Mrs. Ya'qub, we cannot deny that the US prepared software that proliferates false originators of comment across various and many fields. How can one also counter such kind of activity?
By, again, exposing that. See, you know about it, I know about it.
But where are you going to expose it, and in what direction, when you have lots of media outlets and you have lots? Is it only through the social media? Is it only through the internet?
I think we have to employ all strategies, you know, face to face. We should not underestimate the force of physical connections, because they cannot break that. You know, once people's hearts and minds have an attitude, they have a deeper understanding, they can see through it's a filter, they can see through the rubbish. You know, they know this is why they are saying this, and we can ignore that. At the same time, different news channels, so that we break the monopoly, again reaching directly into people's homes. Of course, Twitter and social media have their place as well, and so it is not about limiting to one strategy. In the same way they have multiple strategies, we have to fight back in multiple ways, and different people will have different strengths, so play to your strengths.
I would like now to shift a bit to this, to another subject, which is the anti-Muslim sentiment that is flourishing, or that has flourished since 2001, September 9/11, 2001 in the West. What led to the evolution of such kind of phenomenon? And we all know that it is a made in USA Islamophobia phenomenon.
Well, I believe it's directly linked to the war on terror. So when George Bush said, "You are with us or against us. Anybody who was going to oppose these wars, whether it's in Afghanistan or Iraq, immediately became a traitor. So that includes the non-Muslims on one side. But when you have to dehumanize people to bomb them. You have to have an enemy which becomes the other. And so it became this war about Islamic extremism first. So they distinguished between moderate Islam and extremist Islam, but very quickly it became about Muslims. And Muslims within the West were seen as the enemy within. So this narrative, so we have to prove constantly we are not extremist. But then they keep redefining what extremist is. It first of all starts with Al-Qaeda type ideology, so justifying the killing of innocents, which of course, 99.9% of Muslims would reject. But slowly they said, if you are anti-Zionist, you are an extremist. If you have a political opposition and you happen to be Muslim and you're motivated by your faith, you are an extremist. And so then they started to blur the two things, which are very different. People who believe in the democratic approach but happen to be against imperialism were also lumped together with Al-Qaeda. And the fact is, majority of Muslims feel a sympathy with any Muslim who's being oppressed, and they'd wanted to break this link. And so for now, when it comes to stop and search,
Selma, and how do you, in your capacity as a leader of the Respect Party and, as we said, a British Muslim woman, how do you attempt to face or to stand in face of the growth of such a sentiment?
Well,
particularly in the UK, let's say.
Well, again, it's explaining the roots of it, plus also forming relationships of trust and solidarity with other people, the Christians, Jewish people, atheists. I think it's important to not just become a victim. Whilst I can say that it is true Islamophobia has risen, it is true that Muslims are seen with suspicion within Europe. At the same time, I will say I am proud to be British. There are still huge freedoms in Britain, whether it's the welfare state or the freedom of speech. So we can speak out. There's nothing stopping us from that. People are scared, of course, of being labelled, but as long as we keep struggling, we keep fighting for that space, there are many people who are willing to stand with us. And we have these phenomenon like the English Defence League, which is new. It is Zionist-backed, and it is specifically against Muslims, and they do these big demonstrations, they bring in hatred and division, they make up lies, they distort things to make people in Britain hate the Muslim community. But we've seen that whenever they demonstrate, we have bigger demonstrations of the communities coming together, majority are not Muslim, to say that we are rejecting your message of hate. So it's a constant struggle. It's not that it is fixed. It is not that, although at this time, quite frankly, the EDL are still small, but they keep trying because they know their narrative hooks into this war on terror narrative, which has had the huge support of the elites, the whole establishment, the mainstream media, the language they've used about extremism is very easy to exploit. But at the same time, we have been active. And as I mentioned, I think there will always be a constant struggle. The face of it will change, but the nature of it will be there, and it's about making sure that we are still there.
So is Islamophobia at the heart of a US neocon scheme which is attempting to put the seeds of sectarianism across the region?
I think
and wreak havoc across the region and destabilize actually the region.
Yes. I don't think it's the cause. I don't think it's the reason why they do it. It is not. It is a tool of imperialism. It is a strategy. So, for example, Saudi Arabia is an ally. So if it was just about Muslims, they would want to weaken all Muslim states. But no, they want to strengthen states like Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia supports everything that the Western elites want. If it was about women's rights and democracy, they would criticize Saudi Arabia first. Because of course they don't have democracy there, but it's not about that.
But they offended the Quran, they offended the Prophet of Islam, peace be upon him, through the cartoons and through the burning of the Quran by this Florida pastor.
See, that's a consequence. When you go to war and you talk about Islamic extremism in the way they have so constantly, then other people take that up and then they will go to another level. And of course, this is what you unleash, so this is why it's not surprising, because even in their training, they have the models of the hijab wearing women, that they shoot at, they have this enmity because when they try to whip up their own soldiers to go to war, but the language changes in different places. So when it comes to Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries, they will say, we respect your traditions, because they're happy to trade with them and have them launching their weapons from their countries and have their imperial project supported. Yet, at the same time, they need Muslim countries. So it is a two-faced thing they do. But of course, when you go to war in Muslim countries and you have talked about Muslims as this bloc, and in your own country Muslims are seen as the enemy who will take over, although in Britain we are only 2 to 3%, the language of the far right is that they will take over this country, they want to impose Sharia. You know, this is the language of hatred.
Actually, the Archbishop of Canterbury, he asked for including Sharia law in the British Constitution, but he was faced severely with abhorrent way of facing it.
He actually didn't even say that. It was more on the personal law, for example, around marriage. Jewish law is allowed under the mediation clause. This is not about saying religious law is above the law in England, but there's something called arbitration, where if you choose your mediator, then you are bound to that, but two people need to consent to that. And it can be a secular thing, or it can be a Jewish thing, or it could be a Muslim. And just by him raising that, he was accused of trying to bring Sharia law. You can see how sensitive it is to raise anything about Muslims. So on the one hand, I say we have this freedom, which is great. On the other hand, there is this constant pressure if you are Muslim in the West at the moment.
Right, Mrs. Salma Yaqub, leader of the Respect Party, thanks indeed for joining us on The Inside from Al Mayadeen.
Thank you very much.
ضيف جديد وقضية جديدة من كل الميادين ودائما من الداخل. للمزيد من التواصل بريدنا theinside@almayadeen.net وصفحتنا على الفيسبوك من الداخل. من كل فريق العمل من كل الميادين، إلى اللقاء.